Ask the Podcast Coach for October 9th, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday morning. I went Harry Carey there for a minute. Hey, it's Saturday morning, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live by me. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And joining me in about 20 minutes will be the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim is had some things going on this morning. He's like, I'll be there around 11 Eastern. So if you're wondering, hey, where's that guy, the Jim guy? He will be here shortly. You can jump in if you'd like. We are here at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Feel free to tweet that out, and if you have a question, you can ask it there in the chat room. You can also go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, and that will jump you right here into the video. But before we do that, we need to, of course, have the coffee pour, even though there's nobody here drinking coffee. I do have some McDonald's Coke. We could do that, I guess. And that coffee pour, this one, there we go, is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you need a logo, if you need artwork, if you need a website, if you need a PDF, if you need anything to look good, like the School of Podcasting logo right behind me, or the Ask the Podcast Coach logo down there, go over to podcastbranding.co and talk to my buddy Mark. If you didn't hear last week's episode, man, we got a lot of good feedback on that. Mark came on and just answered a bunch of questions. He's a podcaster, which is great. He's an award-winning graphic artist, and he can definitely make you look professional. Remember, they see you before they hear you. And I was talking with somebody, and I'm in the process of using Teachable to redo my School of Podcasting. And I was trying to pick some different colors. And one of the cool things you can have Mark do is come up with a color palette so that no matter where you're at, everything is going to look good. So whatever you need to make yourself look great, go over to podcastbranding.co and tell Mark that Jim and Dave sent you. Can I sip through the straw? And also, sponsoring Jim's mug that's not here is our buddy Dan over at Based on a True Story podcast. If you've ever watched a movie and you're like, hey, it says based on a true story, but that has an alien in it. You're like, wait, hold on a second. Then by all means, go over and check out Based on a True Story podcast. You can see right there on the front page. He's got the Titanic. He's got things here on the Pacific, Defiance, all sorts of fun stuff here. J. Edgar Hoover, such an interesting dude. So, and if you need some manscaping, apparently at the bottom, he can help you with that on his website. So, thanks for joining me. Like I said, if you're just tuning in, you're like, hey, where is Jim? By all means, he will be here in about 20 minutes. So that's what's going on. And I was sitting here thinking, well, what happens? Here we go. Have I used the Zoom H1N with the advanced features? I have not. I have a Zoom H1. It's about the size of a Snickers. And I have not even looked at the H1N because to me, nothing is going to top the Zoom PodTrack P4 for a little over $200. I can't really see anything going, yeah, that one's 80. And I'm like, yeah, but this one will almost do your laundry. So that's what's going on. So keep that in mind. Is that Hoover the inventor of the vacuum cleaner? No, it is not. That was J. Edgar Hoover was, I believe, the head of the CIA or the FBI. He was a naughty man, basically. And so what we're going to do while we wait for Jim, let me get this off the screen because everybody's like, why are we looking at that website? Because that's what we're going to do. I just realized if I take me off the screen, then I fill up the whole screen. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go over here and we're going to do what I'm now calling the Ask the Podcast Coach hot seat. And if you have a website or something you want me to look at, I'll be more than happy to do that since we have no questions in the chat room. Was the FBI chief? I knew Fred would know for nearly 50 years. Yeah. And so this guy asked on Facebook today, he said, hey, I have been, doing this podcast. I think he said he's up to about 14 episodes and he's just not, no, that was 14 downloads was the most downloads he's had per episode. And I forget exactly how many downloads or how many episodes he said he had. And since he asked for feedback, I don't feel bad going, hey, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And this is the problem. This is where I think, again, I don't know why. Well, I know why. It's hard to spend hours on something and go, here, sir, will you please beat the snot out of this? Nobody seems to like that. And in the chat room, Gary's bringing up Elvis Costello, which is going to make me want to sing What's So Funny? What's so funny about peace, love, and I don't want to sing on the show, but let's get back to this website. And it's learngrowgive.com. So right there, I'm not entirely sure what I know it's about probably improvement and things like that, but learn, grow, give. So I came over to podcast and clicked on it because let's think about this for a second. What do you want people to go? What do you want them to do when you go to their website? So first things first, when you go there, hopefully within 10 seconds, if not 5, you want them to know what your website is about. And so that's one thing. Then you want them to hopefully either contact you, listen to your podcast, or subscribe to the podcast. Now, granted, if this is for a business, you want them to buy something or sign up for a newsletter, things like that. But podcasting wise, you want them to either listen easily, subscribe or follow, take your verb on that, and then maybe contact you to say, hey, that episode was really, really good. So when I come over to podcasts on his website, first of all, notice he says here, the Learn, Grow, Give podcast library. Thanks for stopping by, blah, blah, blah. So can I listen here on this page? Not without scrolling down. Here's a fun one. Finding happiness and fulfillment. That's the featured episode. And yet there's no links here to his featured episode. And so I go, when I look at this, first of all, I'll ask the chat room here, what's the one thing that makes people click? Anybody? What's the one thing that makes people click? It's really, really important to your show. I'll give you some time. I realize there's probably a 7-second delay on this. What makes people click on your show? When I'm looking at a page like this, what's going to make me click? Because what I'm looking at for the people listening on the audio right now is he has 10 players in front of me. That's it. Gary, tell him what he's won. Gary wins. It's a cheese straightener, Gary. Congratulations. Yeah, so he's got 10 players in front of me, of which the one title is How to the other one is Can the Past Div? Another one is It's Not What th-. Another one is It's Not What th-, maybe part 2 of that. Put Instant Grat, The Desire to the blunt get how to, you get the idea. Episode titles are huge, and we can't see any of them. And if I click on these, can I subscribe? Oh, I get show notes that I can read in a 1-inch box. That's convenient. So, now do these play? Sure, these play. But the title, I don't know where I'm going. So I would take these 10 episodes and make a blog post for each one and put that player there with subscribe buttons. I will say this till I die. It's all about subscribers and followers. Take your pick. So when we scroll down here, maybe I'm thinking there's more. Now I go down here. Now I'm kind of confused because I'm like, what is this, a blog post? Is it it's on the podcast title. So I'm thinking this must be the podcast. So it says, why do we need heroes? Okay. 7 best practices for an effective virtual learning environment. Let's do that one. It's got a number in it so that, it must be good. So I click on this, and I've never seen this, by the way. We're doing this live. Okay. Nice graphic at the top. any way to subscribe or play. That's what I'm looking for here. I want to subscribe or I want to play. And I scroll down and he's got decent show notes here. He's got some Google food, distance learning best practices, no player. Really confused why there's no player on a thing that I just clicked on that is a podcast. So this is a blog post, and I've seen people do this, and I do not know why. They will have their show notes in one area and the player in the other. No, because what you want to do is put your player here so that if somebody's listening on their website and they click play, they will stay there. Now, what happens in that case with Google is Google goes, I noticed that every time we put this particular website up, and people go to it, they stay there for a while. That must be really good content. And so, yeah, whatever it is, there's no player. Again, we want people to click play. We want them to follow. And I can't do either here. So I started off confused coming to this page because there were just a bunch of players, but I don't see anywhere on here how to subscribe to this show. So that's my big thing for whoever this guy was on Facebook. I would be number one under podcast, make another sub menu that says subscribe/follow. And no, see, I will never understand this. A pod love subscribe button. Just put the buttons on. Go to subscribe and follow. That's Daniel's plugin if you're using WordPress. I do not understand sending people to another website where they can subscribe when you can just put the subscribe buttons on your website and send people to your website. And those links boost your Google juice, not Podlove's website, not Linktree's website. It boosts your website. I do not understand that. That is a pet peeve of mine when people make link stuff on another platform. I know it's easy. It's really not that hard on your website. So that would be, let's go to the about page just for fun. Because if you don't know this, the about page is probably the second highest page that will bring people to this. So this is where we have to figure out, is this a podcast with a business or a business with a podcast? And so driving passion, achieving goals, and changing lives. I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Is this about what? So this particular, I'm not sharing my screen. No, I am sharing my screen. So if we look at this, does this help a little bit? Maybe, not so much. It's about him, but I would have made that the top thing here, like about so-and-so, because this is all about him. And there's nothing here about the podcast. And I would be tempted to put about the podcast. The Learn, Grow, Give podcast is about such and such and such and such, where we blah, blah, blah. The pod love thingy is on my, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about, okay. Yes, I know what you're saying. But that's also, I don't send people to what they're saying in the chat room. Stefan is saying, hey, I'm using the pod love thing. I am, but I don't tell people to go to podlove.com/whatever. I will tell them to go to maybe schoolofpodcasting.com/follow. It's still my brand. I shouldn't say I never promote other brands because for the record, I'm horrible at making other websites that aren't mine. Like I have podcastingresources.com. Why isn't that schoolofpodcasting.com/resources? Because there are times when I do stupid stuff. But if I could go back in time, I would, but that website now has Google traffic. So I leave it there. So that would be what I would do here on this particular website. So that would be my advice for somebody who's just starting out. And I think, to me, again, these look okay. For me would be, this is where I think, and it doesn't have to be me, but get somebody who you are not related to, who is, not your best friend that you grew up with or whatever, to get some feedback. Because when I saw that, I was like, ooh, this seems to be a person who is way too close to the trees to kind of get a objective view of your own stuff. It's hard to do. It really is. So the other thing I wanted to ask somebody to test for me, if you're on Facebook, see if you can copy something from Facebook and paste it into something else, because that's what I do every Saturday morning. I use Trello just because why not, to keep all my ideas about what we might talk about on the show. And I go to Facebook and I get questions and I copy them and I paste them into Trello. And this morning, Facebook would not let me copy anything from Facebook. Now, if you missed the week, Facebook had a fun week. They were down for 6 hours, which is why I will be moving to circle.so in the future. And I don't have to worry. I heard another last night. I was on the Podcasters Roundtable. Ray Ortega, not a big fan of Facebook. Everybody I run into is like, not a big fan of Facebook. And if you watched the whistleblower on 60 Minutes, there was a woman from Facebook that worked there, smuggled thousands of documents out. And basically, she said that Facebook likes to stir the pot. Now, this is not a revelation of anybody. Facebook likes to get, because it turns out people will be drawn to, like moth to a flame, things that make them mad because you want to go, which is when you think about it. I made a post this week because people were GLAAD came out after Dave Chappelle saying he was homophobic. And if you watch the last 10 minutes of Dave Chappelle's latest special on Netflix, I highly recommend it, by the way. The last 10 minutes were amazing. Like, holy shnikes, amazing. And he kind of said, I'm going to get attacked for this. And he did. And I just thought it was funny that he's like, watch, this is what's going to happen. And that's why he also kind of said he thinks that's going to be his last special for a while. Because he was like, I'm going to put this out there and watch them attack me. And they did. And yeah, Gary says Facebook likes to make money by stirring the pot. And they do. And that's basically what this whistleblower said. And so I keep telling people, find somebody you don't agree with and have a conversation, because my guess is you're probably missing some information here. So I went out to Facebook, and what I ended up having to do was take a screenshot of a question so I could read it here. But this kind of ties into getting attacked in Facebook and things like that. And this is from Valeska. And she said, I made a post earlier. We talked about it, I think it was last week, saying that the only thing I didn't like about podcasting is that we can't reply or delete inaccurate, that's interesting, or hateful reviews. And thanks to a couple of people here, I found out I can dispute it. I did, and had a reply within hours. I understand that haters are part of the process, but the more we let people get away with doing things that are wrong, there's a fun word, without even trying to do anything about it, the more permission we give them to just about do whatever they want, to let them just lie about whatever they want. I feel it's not just important for yourself, but your potential future listeners if you do get hateful, incorrect things removed about you, because those reviews can and will affect at least some people deciding not to listen because you have a bad review. I don't know. If somebody tells me that this show is good, I will go listen to it. And I don't care if there's 15 million bad reviews there. That my friend said it was good. I trust them. I don't trust any reviews. There was a thing on Amazon that Bandrew Scott was talking about. A bunch of companies got kicked off because what would happen is they would have you buy things on Amazon, so you're a verified buyer. They would then give you a refund via PayPal, so you got the product for free, and then say, now write me a 5-star review. So just the thing that really, if I were to put on my old man hat, I'm glad I'm on the back nine, kids, is because the one thing that's going away that we can't find anymore is the truth. We don't know what the truth is, and if you don't know what the truth is, well, I guess we're all screwed. And that's really about it. I'm really looking at this going, man, like, it used to be like, here, look, we did this test, and they just anyway. Let me see. I read somewhere you can get reviews on Apple's removed. Apparently that you can contest them. But the thing I thought was interesting is she said lie. Because people lie about, well, if I say, hey, that I don't like your show, because I'll give you an example. I somehow ended up listening to Sylvester Stallone's daughter's podcast. Now they're 20, 23 to 28 ish. They had Sly on, and he came on and went for about 45 minutes. The first 5 minutes were horrendous. And I mean, like, why is this here when like Sly's like, I don't know how to use the microphone. I was like, that could have been edited out, you know? And so I could say, I don't like that show because I like that episode because I like Sly and he's pretty entertaining. But the other ones, like there was one like What Our Perfect Guy Is. Now I could say I don't like that show, and they could very easily, and they would be right, say, hey, guess what, old middle-aged white guy, you're not my target audience. But if I say I don't like your show, I'm not lying. So that's the part I thought was interesting. And also she used the word wrong. And that's the other thing. Wrong is that's a judgment call. Now there are some things we kind of all agree on that, like, I don't know, if you shoot that guy for no reason, that's kind of wrong. You know, I think we all agree on that one. But other things like audio quality, that's subjective. You know, there's some people that think when your mic is 10 miles away from you and you sound like this, that's perfectly fine. But I tend to think that's wrong. And Scott Johnson has a great point here. He says, look at any major podcaster. They all have hundreds or thousands of one-star reviews. Think it affects their process or their income? No, it doesn't. I get that there is a I don't know what the percentage is, but there is a percentage of people that go to Apple and maybe they've typed in a subject. Maybe they're looking for bodyboarding. Is that a sport? Sounds like it should be. Bodyboarding. And they type in bodyboarding, and there are 4 podcasts there. One has 100 reviews, one has 6, one has 30, and one has 50. Well, the first thing I'm going to look at is not the reviews. You guessed it. I'm going to look at the artwork. You know, I'm going to look at how many episodes they are. Then I'm going to click on them and see, are they still producing? And then I'm going to click play. And if it starts off and it sounds like this, I'm not listening to that. So I click on the next one. And if they come across, they're like, welcome in a world where people are bodyboarding. Yeah, sure. That would be fine. But, Uncle Marv says podcasts should try to be like TV. If you don't like the show, change the channel. Yeah, that was my whole thing when they were picking on Dave Chappelle. I'm like, if you don't like him, there's an easy way. I walked into my local Walmart here. We have one of those ginormous ones. It's got groceries, the whole 9 yards. And they redid the whole thing. They're still doing it, which I think this is illegal. I was in there 2 nights ago. There's no public restrooms. And I'm like, isn't that illegal? But they removed at least 15 registers and put it in self-checkouts. And I was like, I hate that. I hate that because there are a lot of times I go to Walmart for groceries. Their groceries are ridiculously cheap. And I will have a big old thing. And I'm like, I don't want to check myself out. Not to mention the fact that part of the price of my Raisin Bran is paying for somebody to ring me out. But on the other hand, so if I really don't like that, what should I do? I should vote with my wallet and go to Target, or I don't know, Giant Eagle, or any of the other grocery stores around here. We should vote with our wallet. And we don't. We do. We vote with our wallet. We're like, well, that's cheap. I guess I'll go check myself out. So yeah. So if you don't like something, don't watch it, and it will go away. In theory, is the way that works. So I thought that was an interesting point. The fact that she's like, it's wrong, and she's going to fight them, and by all means. But again, we kind of said this last week. If you got into podcasting, or God bless you if you got into YouTube, you're going to get negative reviews. And what's I still think odd, but it's just human nature. We could get 80 positive reviews and 1 negative one, and we can recite the negative one like it's scripture and completely ignore the 80 positive ones. So if you are watching on Clubhouse, you can raise your hand and I'll bring you up on stage. If you're watching live at askthepodcastcoach.com/live, feel free to chip in with a question there via chat, or if you want to jump in and join me here, just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And I thought this was an interesting one. I also wanted to read. This was from Patrick. And I almost think he's making a joke, but he said, I've been thinking of making a comedy podcast / reformatting my current talk podcast to a more comedy oriented podcast. Now, call me crazy. If you're going to call it a comedy podcast, I tend to expect that when I hit play, somewhere in the first 5 to 10 minutes, I should at least chuckle. Call me weird. It's a comedy podcast. And I realize there are a lot of comedians that classify their interview show as comedy, and yet none of them make me laugh. Conan tries really hard to be weird with his sidekicks that I just fast forward. But so he says, but I'm not sure if I need to make jokes. Well, I'm thinking if you want to make people laugh, I would think, call me crazy, that you'd want to make some jokes or say something witty. Yeah, I'm thinking again, if the goal is to be a comedy show, saying funny things would be on the I think that's on the I think it's on the docket. I think that's on the buffet. I think you should do that. My question is there being, if I make a comedy podcast, how can I be funny? And if you're asking how can I be funny, and he says serious answers please only. So that one made me scratch my head, because if you're not sure if you're funny, I guess you could try it on a podcast and see if people go, hey, you're really funny. Or you could read books. There are books on how to be funny. I read about half of one and was like, nah. But I just thought that was interesting. It's like, hey, I want to make a comedy podcast, and yet, should I be funny in it? So it's kind of interesting. Stefan says sometimes the downvotes are from people which have much time on their hands, nothing better to do, or in some cases, your competition. Yes, that is true. Funny, like Good Morning Vietnam. Well, that's true. But he was kind of telling jokes, It's hot. It's hot like crotch pot cooking. I mean, that's kind of a joke. It's a funny thing. Gary says you're either funny or you're not. Also, Scott Johnson mentioned Steve Martin's masterclass, which actually was I watched that because I'm a huge Steve Martin fan, and he did make some good points in there, but it wasn't so much how to write a punchline or things like that. So we have a question here from Felix. Can a show have multiple formats? I'm thinking of doing short 10-minute shows throughout the week and a single interview once a bye week. Does it work? It can. The key is yes, basically. Jordan Harbinger, but his isn't so much a difference. He does long interviews, and on Friday, it's still a long episode. He answers questions, but you can. The bottom line is, does it deliver value? Now, when it's drastically different, where somebody is 10 minutes one week and then the next show is 45, some people, I have a playlist called short shows, and they're all like 5 to 10 minutes. And I love those because it takes me 7 minutes to walk around the block. So I can go to my short show list, listen to an episode, walk around the block, and be good. So the problem is, what happens then when your long interview comes out and I'm one way around the block and I'm like 25% through your episode? Not the end of the world, but I know some people like that. So, ask your audience. Some people will put it in once or twice, and give it a shot and see what's going on. But I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys think in the chat room? Or I know somebody who might have an opinion on it. We'll bring this guy in. You know him, you love him. Oh, we're not on the hot seat anymore. I forgot about that. Here, let me get you off the hot seat, Jim. I don't want you to get burned.
Nice.
But
should I say greetings and happy Saturday morning to you?
Yes. The question is, can you have, let me find the question. I just had it. He was asking, here we go, Felix. Can a show have multiple formats? I'm thinking of doing a short 10-minute show throughout the week and a single interview once a week or bi-weekly. And I was just saying, well, some people have certain activities that they do with, like I walk around the block, so I have short shows for that. I don't think it's the end of the world if you do it. I'm just thinking some people might go, so.
Yeah. I think if your audience will listen to it, then yes, right? I mean, Cigar Authority does a 2-hour show and then a 30-minute one that they alternate back and forth on. And I think they've debated about, does it get its own channel? In fact, they asked me, and I thought, it should probably have its own channel. That way you can subscribe if you like the 2-hour show. You can subscribe to it. If you want the 30-minute show, you can subscribe to that. But at the end of the day, if your listeners download it and listen to it, is there a difference? Right?
Yeah.
You know?
And I really, Stefan in the chat room says, if it fits the interest of your listeners, like you may have like car things, and then on Friday we're going to talk cheese. It's like that may not work.
There's a podcast called One Nation Under Whiskey, and they do a 2-hour. Isn't it great? Isn't that a great? That's a great title for it. They do a 2-hour and then a 30-minute as well. That 30-minute goes 45 most of the time. They try. They say a tight 30 minutes. They don't ever really do it. But again, that they mix them up and they're different. I mean, they're both about whiskey, but they're different kind of formats. They do it in the same feed. I listen to both. In fact, sometimes I choose based on what I'm doing, what I listen to. And I like that. Like, oh, no, I don't have time for the 2-hour show. So I'll just listen to the shorter shows. So sometimes that gives me more choice without having to have another podcast feed, I guess is the way that'd work.
Yeah. The other thing, you could try it and then look at the downloads and see if one is getting considerably more or less. But
put out a survey, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So.
Jim, are you thirsty at all?
I am. And actually, so we'll just fake the pour because I put the coffee in, but
yes.
Did you do the?
We did. Okay. We done it all.
Well, let me just say, let me say my part. Big thanks to Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, I'm already a couple cups of coffee in this morning because I had a meeting first thing this morning, which is why I'm late. But always appreciate his sponsorship of the show. If you're looking for a new podcast to listen to, where you want to get kind of figure out what's based on a true story or not, he's got some great podcasts out there based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
There we go. And speaking of short shows, if you're looking for a short show about dogs, then you got to check out the Dog Podcast Network. If you need a long show about dogs, guess what? Dog Podcast Network. If your dog has cancer, guess what? Dog Podcast Network. It's all there. If you like podcasts about dogs, dogpodcastnetwork.com. And we always thank our awesome supporters who donate $20 a month. And that is people like Michael Delaney over at Baby Mountain Radio Productions, where podcasting and hard work are made fun. Check him out at babymountainradio.com. Shane at the Tourpreneur. If you operate a tour business or plan on starting one, that podcast, tourpreneur.com, is for you. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. If you have a horsey, you got to check out horseradionetwork.com. The Indie Drop-In Network. If you have a true crime, a comedy, or a scary story, which comes in really handy around this time of year in October, then check out the indiedropin.com network. You can give Greg, the guy that's running that over there, a couple episodes, and he will put that in front of his audience. Ed Sullivan over at soniccupcake.com. If you need an editor, Ed can definitely connect you and get you sounding great. Felix over at the Latin Podcast Awards, which is dedicated to enhancing the visibility of the Latinx podcast around the world since 2017. Check them out at latinpodcastawards.com. Max Trescott at aviationnewstalk.com. So if you're a pilot or interested in aviation, check him out. And then the KJST Media, it's an LGBTQ plus founded company focused on helping all levels of podcasters to grow their podcast, regardless of what you're looking for. Caden is there to help you. Check it out, kjstmedia.com. Greg over at debtshepherd.com, where he is teaching financial wellness. Check him out again, debtshepherd.com. Kim over at Toastmasters101.net. If you need to develop your voice, improve your content, or reduce your editing time, check it out, Toastmasters101.net. And if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, because I know you were going to do that last week and you're like, oh, I should do that. Go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, or you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/store and do other things like one-time donations. You can buy my book and all sorts of other fun stuff. It's all there at askthepodcastcoach.com/store. So yes, I did something new since you weren't here. We some guy in Facebook asked me, he was like, hey, like I'm only getting like 14 downloads. What's the deal? And so we looked at his website and there were some things, that he could do. So the other thing, Jim, you can be my tester. If you go to Facebook, can you copy anything from Facebook into another program? Because that's normally how I do it. And it's kind of weird because this morning I could not I couldn't.
So you're just saying like grabbing
Anything from a
anything
Facebook
from
group
anywhere?
and just copy it and then go to paste
All
it. And
right,
it was really weird because I went to like just my website, grabbed something. I thought maybe there was something funky in my computer memory or something like that. And it was just like, nope.
just
When it,
like text from anywhere.
yes. And like
And
it was a Facebook group. I don't know if that matters.
yeah, no, it's working for me.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
Okay. Gremlins. Because that was me. I was like, it's got to be something weird. And I just rebooted my computer. That was the other thing. I was like, well, I would reboot, except, well, I just did that. So anyway.
I did hear you talking about haters, bad
Yeah.
comments. As I was driving back from the meeting I had this morning,
Mhm.
or breakfast, I should say. There's a breakfast meeting. And I got this last week, I got a 1-word review, or not review, but it was a comment on YouTube. I go and check those every couple days for our Gallup stuff, and it just said worthless. Just one
Wow.
word, worthless. Now it's a video. It's a video that gets pretty good love from the community, and some people are just looking to pick a fight. Some people are just angry. Some people have low self-esteem. Whatever it takes. But it's just like, well, okay, it was worthless to you. You had been saying, truth is a interesting word in this. When people are saying, well, yeah, that's not true. Well, to that person, whoever it was truth. It was worthless to them. So, okay, it's worthless to you. I'm sorry you wasted your time. But I do know there are others who are getting great value out of it because there's a bunch of other comments saying so. So I think sometimes to the person who was piping in on this, sometimes you just have to have some thick skin and let the 1 stars go.
That's it.
Yeah, let them go.
Yeah.
And listen, they're not as bad as you think they are for these people coming in and listening. You always feel like, oh, I'm going to have to close the doors. They're not. No. Just let it ride. Let it ride. It'll be fine. Don't fight it.
And we've now realized what Jim's superpower is.
What?
When you show up, the chat room starts asking questions. I was like, anybody got a question? Anybody? Really? Okay, well, let's look at this guy's website. Thoughts on having your podcast on YouTube with no video, just a screenshot of the show. Does that realistically expand subscribers? My thought on that is I'm not putting that on what I would call a real YouTube channel. I have one that I created a special YouTube channel just for what I will call fake video. And I think my largest number of views on that was 8. And I think the most anybody watched was 60%. So, but to me, it's like, it's free.
Doesn't hurt.
Cost. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. Why not? But I would not put those kind of videos, he said in quotation marks, in a channel I was trying to grow. I would make it its own thing. So, and then Stephen wants to know, what do we think about the new dynamic microphone M70 Pro X by Beyerdynamic? To which I go, huh? How much is it? Is it I guess it's a dynamic. I don't know. I'm kind of, unless it's really cheap and really good, I'm pretty good with the Samson Q2U or the ATR 2100. I'm kind of like, unless there's something that made it really better than one of those two, those are the two that you got to jump off. And I usually recommend the Samson Q2U just because it's easier to get in Europe. So it's like media hosts. I used to make a podcast for every media host, and then all of a sudden there were 50 of them. And I went, well, that's not going to work anymore. So I'm kind of like, look, it's either Libsyn or, Buzzsprout or Captivate, or, I've got all those, but I did an episode on that. I'm like, hey, the bottom line is it doesn't matter. I've never heard of Beyerdynamic. Is that who makes this stuff? Let me see here. No. How much is it, Jim? Does it say?
Let's look. I thought there was
probably not.
Got good pictures of it. Yeah, $299.
See, if I'm paying $300, you've got to beat this one, the Electro-Royce RE320. Perfect. And I've never heard of Beyerdynamic. There's probably somebody going, what? You've never heard of Beyerdynamic? It's probably this great. Maybe it's somebody who came down in price. Normally they make super duper expensive microphones. I don't know. If you like sending me one, I'll be happy to play with it. I did finally get a hold of somebody at Shure. after they come.
Shock mount and pop filter included in that
Ah,
price. Yeah.
well, see, I've heard that before when they go shock mount included with like the Rode podcast mic, and I'm like, you can make that thing pop pretty easy. At least they're giving you a shock mount, which is kind of cool. But and again, to me, microphones, Bandrew Scott on the Podcastage YouTube channel just reviewed the Shure MVX. So it's, how they came out with the MV7, which was USB and XLR. Well, they got rid of the USB. So now you have like Shure SM7B, which is $400, I think.
Okay.
And now this one's like $250. And it's kind of like SM7B light. And so what Bandrew did, and he does this because it's like, hey, let's go back to, the MVX mic. Okay, now here's the Samson Q2U. Okay, let's go back to the MVX. Now here's an ATR 2100. He went back and forth. And he always goes back to the mic to kind of cleanse your palate, I guess, in a way. And after about 5 or 6 microphones, I'm like, I don't hear any difference. I mean, if one's a little more bassier, I can go into Audacity or Audition or Hindenburg and make it bassier there. It's really, as I was watching, I'm like, do people not get that it's not the tech? It's the tech that makes you feel comfortable. If you find a microphone and you go, ooh, I like the way I sound on this, that's the microphone for you. Because other than that, it's really, for me at least, I don't know that I listen to a podcast. The one that will kill me if you have like a where you need a de-esser. Your S's kind of make me like blink because they're super shrill or something like that. Other than that, or if it's just, recorded in a fishbowl or just whatever, it's pretty hard to make bad sounding audio. People still find a way to do it, but for me, I just don't think it's, I don't want to say it's not important, because it is, because then somebody will go buy a $10 microphone and go, what do you mean? You said it wasn't important. I'm like, nah.
Here's an interesting screenshot. Let me reshare my screen again. Throw that up there. Look, so look at the there's 4 pictures here. Look at the lady 3 in from the left. She's talking into it pointed directly from the top. And then there's someone singing, or I'm assuming they're singing, and they're singing into it from the side. And so, I typically, like, a microphone has a direction. Maybe this is omnidirectional and some of those other things, but it's just interesting. I guess both, not all microphones are built that way. So that may be one of these where maybe it's okay from both directly on the side and directly on the top. Generally not, but
no,
I'm not an engineer either. I'm not a sound engineer. So maybe that's okay. Maybe it's built to go that way. It just was one of those, like, that's interesting.
I've just never heard of biodynamic. So maybe I'll go ask Andrew. If you go to podcastage.com, he's probably already reviewed it. That guy
probably has.
He really, really just, that's all he does.
It probably lives in that same space. Thanks for doing that. Probably lives in that same space as the Heil and the RE and in that $300 to $600 range. I bet the average person's going to have a hard time telling the difference if you just stayed in that range. Chris Curran, some of those guys, they're going to be able to tell the difference, right? I think, Chris could probably tell the difference between 3 or 4 megahertz or whatever that is in the, in the sound spectrum, but I think for a lot of people, it just kind of depend. What do you want? Do you think there's any for video podcasts like this? Do you think there's any lift for the look? Like, I've got this, you've got that, yours is bigger than mine. Is that a problem?
That's kind of what this new Shure MVX microphone, everybody's like, hey, like Bandrew said, it's a good mic. He goes, but literally you could get a Shure SM58 and it would sound just as good. He goes, but this one looks better because it's got that Joe Rogan kind of mic. So you could have it, way down here and pointed at your chin, and it would probably still sound okay. It's just not $400. It's $250, probably, something like that. So
Dave, what's your top end for a mic, do you think, for you? Say where do you think you draw the line and say, you're now not getting any more for the price. What do you think?
Boy, that's a great question. I would say probably somewhere between $200 and $300.
Okay.
Like when you go from like 50 to 100, you go, ooh, wow, that sounds different. When you go to 100 to 200, a little. But when you go above 200, like when I listen to a mic that's $200 and one that's 300, I'm like, you know what I mean? Okay, this one's got a little more bass to it.
So you have the 320, you have the
Yeah.
RE320. The RE20 is a couple $100 more.
I think it's $100 more.
$100 more.
I've almost bought it, and I've almost bought the Shure SM7B, and that's where I kind of go.
And would you buy? So if you're making a choice between a 20 and a 320, and you have the money,
I would go with the 20.
You go with the 20. Okay.
If I had the microphone, if I had the money, yeah. But the reason I have this one is because it's $100 cheaper, but it's almost for video again. If you're doing a show about radio and you show up with an RE320, anybody in radio is going to go, "Oh, that guy's serious," because that's in every radio station.
Yeah.
Where it's a very, very niche kind of thing. But yeah, I've listened to a SM7B every time I go to a show and I put headphones on and I talk. And of course, they've probably got it all juiced up, so it sounds great or whatever. But I always go, I need to walk away here because I feel my wallet catching on fire. But I don't think if I got it side by side, I'm pretty sure I could take this microphone, make it sound like an SM7B. I do just turn up the bass, and I think an EQ, it's I think maybe the better stat that we should be looking at is rear rejection, and how the pattern is, how tight it is to picking up things just in front of you, and Ray was talking about it last night on the Podcasters Roundtable, the MVX, and they called it something like voice isolation, something like that. And he goes, it's the polar pattern. He goes, but it sounds like to non-geeky people, it's like, ooh, voice isolation built into it. It's like, it's a dynamic microphone. That's what voice isolation means. So, Kyle says you don't need anything above $400 for voice only podcasting. If you're a musician or doing Foley work, then the more expensive ones. Yeah. That's when you get into, the other one, condenser microphones, because they're going to pick up a little more lows. They're going to pick up a little more highs. So, Tom says I bought a RE20 for $400. Yeah. I think this is 3. The RE20 is 4. And I'm not sure what a SM7B is going for. I want to say close to 5. It's a lot, and then I always think it's funny because you buy an SM7B and you got to go buy a FET or a cloud lifter to use it because it's so gain hungry.
So it's another $100, right?
Yeah. So I was like, and that's where I always ask people when they go, should I get a different mic? I'm like, are people complaining about your audio? No. Well, then, do you like the mic? Yes. Then, no, you don't need a new mic.
I think about it all the time. I've the ATR 2100. I've got a Q2U that sits in the bowl behind me, and I kind of think I've been doing this a long time. I should probably have one of those fancy ones like you guys do. and then I think, no, why? Like, I guess if this one broke and the Q2U broke, I guess I would be, like, okay, if I'm buying it, maybe I do upgrade to the $300 or $400 as opposed to the the $100. But what if it's not broke, right? Why fix it? Type deal.
Yeah, I know. I've been looking at, and I always think it's kind of funny when people are like, well, like the RE320 is a big microphone. I've got it taking up half the screen, and I could do things to kind of get it out of the shot. But I'm like, yeah, but I'm a podcaster. Like, should my audience expect to see me in front of a microphone? You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
That's the part. I know. I've looked at the Rode Go microphones, the little wireless ones they have, and they seem to sound really good. And I've been watching a lot of videos on those, and they're really cool where you can have them record on the receiver, all sorts of cool stuff.
Wireless Go 2, I think is what we're talking about.
Yeah. And they now have accessories. In fact, let me throw a link to these, where it's a stick. It's basically just a stick. Cause I have the Rode Reporter microphone that is really just what I call the Bob Barker. I mean, it's really long, right? So I can do this and basically point it at people, and it's this without a microphone on the top, and you just snap the Go wireless into it, put a windscreen on it, and you've got the Bob Barker mic. And I was like, so they're kind of creating their own little ecosystem around the Rode Wireless Go, and I was like, it's one of those where you're like, okay, I need to quit watching this video because my wallet's getting hot.
I don't have that gear acquisition syndrome like others do. I don't. That's not it. Like I think about buying some. It took me, I bought this Motu after being out in Boston with Ed Sullivan.
See, that's it. You hang out with Ed, you spend money.
Oh, that's dangerous. It is dangerous to be with Ed. And but it took me a while to make that. It really took me a while. I make the decision fast and then I pull back just as quick. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really gonna, and so I don't struggle with it as much. It's one of those kinds of things. Then I end up going kind of cheap and I always regret it. I always like, why did I buy the cheapest thing? I should have spent a little bit more. So I just don't struggle with that as much.
I'm trying to get into that mindset because I really like the lights I have now. It's the third set I bought. And I wanted to buy these when I bought my first set, and then I bought those, and those were okay, and they looked better than the built-in lighting I had in my house. So I bought those, and then I bought a second set that looked a lot like these, but they weren't as expensive. And in the end, I got these, and again, those weren't bad either. I just liked the way I have the control over these, so I'm kind of trying to realize that maybe sometimes I just save my money, my pennies, and buy the thing I want and go that route. So
have you ever bought something real quick? You ever bought something that you just question and then you get it and you're like, oh, this was a great decision. Like, that every once in a while you have that too, or somebody gives you something and you're kind of thinking, I don't know. And then all of a sudden you're like, man, this is the best thing since sliced bread and peanut butter. So I always get caught in that too. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm going to miss out. Like this could be really good.
Yeah. My snowblower, I remember I bought it, and those things aren't cheap. And you're like, and then the first big snow, and you pull that cord and you're like, okay, yeah, this was,
this was a good decision.
Yeah. No buyer's remorse on this one.
Yes. Yeah. You usually get what you pay for though, right? I mean, I think most of the time you usually get what you pay for.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw somebody, I'm in an Anchor group, for Anchor users. And they were kind of, and it's very hard because I usually just go in there to listen and watch. And they were kind of saying how, well, this doesn't do this and it doesn't do. And I was like, no, I must stop myself from typing. You get what you pay for.
For sure.
So Kyle's is talking about Zoom stuff. He says, I have an H1, an H2, an H4, and an H6. The H6 is now my go-to recorder. No mixer required anymore. Sorry, Mackie. Yeah, we all, I think, have done that. When I first started off, I had a Shure SM58, and then I bought two microphones. I bought one microphone because it was a quote vocal mic, which was an MXL something, and I bought it from a guy at Guitar Center. And then I heard I forget his name, Scott something. He invented the word pod fading. I remember that. But anyway, he had the total DJ voice and did voiceover. And I'm like, what mic do you have? And it was, I forget the even type, but it's still in my closet, because I wanted to sound like him. And then I was like, then I went back to my Shure SM58 because that was a condenser microphone. And at that point, I was next to a water heater. And that just, yeah. Oh, Daniel got kicked out of the Anchor.
Nice. What do you have to say Daniel, to get kicked out of a group?
Such a troublemaker. That's funny. Well, speaking of that, I do have a card here that says Anchor sucks. So I'm going to read this. Paul, someone creates a show the same name as yours, steals an episode from you, the literal recording, then calls that episode their own by slipping it into their show's feed. They also throw an ad on the episode to gain income. They repeat this process for other shows, and soon they have multiple sources of income from your content. This happened to me. I can't prove they have multiple shows, but it seems like that would be the path they'd take. They created a show with the same name as mine, stole my content, and put it in their episode. They didn't introduce my content or anything. They just made it their own. They threw an Anchor ad at the beginning. I imagine they have created multiple shows, all with Anchor ads in order to gain the system. The good news is Anchor doesn't list them anymore, so that is kind of good. However, they still seem to have the RSS as active from what I can tell. I've contacted both Anchor and Apple to have it removed. And what's going to be really scary about this is Spotify is rolling out their ad marketplace for the top Anchor users. And that's when I was like, define that, please. And but if it's going to be easier to get ads on, because right now the only ad on Anchor is for Anchor. Hotpot actually wrote an article about that, and part of it is, if you don't know who you're advertising on, advertisers aren't real crazy about just please associate my product with anybody. It doesn't matter, right? So that's going to be interesting to see.
What do you need to have, Dave? Like, okay, I get they stole your show,
right?
But you're not Joe Rogan. Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't that only really work is if your show is getting tens of thousands or 20s of thousands to make it even worth it? Like, Home Gadget Geeks does, let's just say it does 600 to 1,000, right? And I could, I'm going to make so little off of that. I make a little bit off of it. What if somebody was trying to put it in a different feed for people who didn't know me? Like, I guess I'm questioning how successful could that actually be, one.
Right.
And two, I think if you're doing your show right and you're loading it full of contacts back to you, yeah, you're not getting the ad revenue for it. But man, if someone else is doing the legwork to get the advertising on the front of it, and you're doing your job right in the podcast to get recognition, like I'd listen, I would gladly, I'd let them have the ad revenue if they're going to promote my podcast.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like get over yourself in that case and kind of go, you're not Joe Rogan. You're not losing millions of dollars on this thing. You're losing fives of dollars, maybe less. I don't know. Am I wrong?
No, I'm with you on that. Because if you think about, for that to work, the idea is let's say I'm going to lure Aaron Lanke, right? Really popular show. I'm going to take his RSS feed. I'm going to import it into Anchor. I'm going to, of course, Anchor will, if you want them, they'll submit it automatically for you to Apple. And now I read my Anchor ad at the beginning of it. So when people go, oh, my friend told me I should look for the Lore podcast, and they find yours instead of the real one. But like, I don't know that everybody's saying, oh, you need to go listen to Ask the Podcast Coach. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, great. You stole my show. But so it's going to work with the top shows, but
yeah. Again, if I had a show, I mean, and I just don't think, I don't know this guy that was saying this, if he's got a top show or not. Of course, if you have a top show, then don't you pay somebody to do it?
Yeah.
To do something about it. I've heard this from folks before where they're just like, well, they stole my show. And it's like, well, how many listeners do you actually have? And maybe it's a benefit to you. Like, if they're doing everything they can to promote your feed so that they get the ad revenue, they may be doing more promotion for you than you're doing for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and Kyle says if they steal your show name, go trademark it, file the paperwork, create a paper trail, and that'll take it down.
Yeah.
I
don't put enough money in this to even care about it. Maybe that's my problem.
Well, and I don't think it would be hard to go, hey, do you hear that voice on that show? That's mine. Like, and take it down, would you?
Yeah. So, I just don't think people listen to podcasts that way. They listen to them because of the people who are on them, and they connect with those people. They don't connect with the RSS feed. Who cares where it is?
Yeah, it's going to be.
Who cares?
Well, the other thing is, the last time I checked, Anchor was paying a penny a download. It was $10 for 1,000 downloads, so a penny. So I'm like,
yeah, how much could it be?
Yeah.
It's like they're making $7 a year off of your feed.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it's correct, and it's
right.
It's not legal, but it is one of those where it's like, but that's where they have the new spec that Adam Curry's working on, where they have a lock tag where you can basically almost like a domain name, where if somebody tries to import your feed
Right,
into Anchor and
right.
you have the lock tag on, in theory, if Anchor is recognizing that, in theory, they shouldn't then import the feed. So there's a lot of shoulds and maybe and kind of, but we'll see. But
I encourage everyone listening to Ask the Podcast Coach, steal Home Gadget Geeks. You can make as many feeds out of it, add all the advertising that you want to it. And if you promote home, because I promote so much stuff internally of things that we do in the community and those kinds of things. And I say the average guy.tv studios and stuff. So anyways, if you want to take Home Gadget Geeks, it's all yours.
Oh, well, speaking of Home Gadget Geeks, what is coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
What do we do this week? Oh, so I've been doing a series where we have our Patreon supporters coming on. And so,
nice.
So I had a guest on, talked a little bit about he made a bike trip from Denver to Minneapolis. No, it's probably not Milwaukee. There we go. It's that one. And so we talked about the tech and the gear that he used on this month-long bike trip across bicycle. He rode halfway or a third away across the United States. So that's go live a little bit later here on the Average Guy TV.
My butt hurts just thinking about that. It's like, holy cow. That's a lot of riding.
Soft seats. We also talked about these e-bikes that are real popular right now. Right. So if you're into that, it's out there right now. Well, it will be later.
There you go. Yeah. And on the School of Podcasting, I'll be talking about something about podcasting of which I haven't figured out yet. It's in my Evernote, and I'll flip a coin and do one of it. Yeah. Excellent. So want to say thanks to the chat room for coming out. We're here every Saturday. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. Thanks to Mark over at podcastbranding.co, Dan over at based on a true story podcast.com, and James at the dogpodcastnetwork.com. So stick around. We do have some post show, and Jim is going to do a big reveal in the show, in the post show. So that does not have anything to do with clothing, by the way, just in case you're wondering, but stick around. It's coming right up.